What happens when a black woman walks into a bank, asking for a simple withdrawal, and is met with suspicion instead? Is it just a routine check, or is there something deeper at play? As the tension rises, will she expose the truth, or will the bank's hidden biases be allowed to stand? Stay tuned to see what happens next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories. Emma Brooks, the formidable CEO of Brookside Trust, had always prided herself on the bank's commitment to fairness and equality. For years, she had implemented policies to ensure that all customers were treated with respect, regardless of their background. But as the bank grew, Emma started to wonder if her lofty ideals were truly reflected in every branch. She had heard rumors from trusted sources, whispers of customers being treated differently, though nothing concrete. It was time to put her beliefs to the test. One crisp morning, dressed in a simple cardigan, jeans, and sneakers, Emma walked into one of her own branches in Manhattan, New York. She made sure to leave behind the aura of the CEO, no designer clothes or expensive accessories. Just a regular woman, carrying nothing but a small handbag. Today, Emma wasn't the leader of a billion-dollar institution. She was just another customer, about to experience the service that her employees were supposed to provide to everyone. She entered the Brookside Trust branch with calm determination, the automatic doors swishing open to reveal the familiar, polished interior. The lobby was well maintained, but Emma knew the real test would be in how she, as a customer, was treated. She was here to observe, to understand if the core values of fairness, respect, and equality that she had championed for so long were truly being upheld. As she took her first step toward the counter, she was fully aware that what happened next could have serious implications, not just for the branch, but for the future of her bank itself. Emma approached the counter with a calm but focused demeanor, her eyes scanning the lobby briefly before settling on the young teller. She had carefully chosen this branch for her test, Brookside Trust's flagship location in Manhattan, a bank she had personally helped build. The idea of being treated like an ordinary customer, of feeling the experience from a different perspective, had been on her mind for some time. Today, she would see firsthand if her employees truly treated all customers equally. The teller, a young woman named Rachel, looked up briefly from her computer screen as Emma approached, but there was no warmth in her gaze, no greeting, no acknowledgement. Just a quick glance at Emma's ID, followed by a curt, "Can I help you?" Emma gave a polite smile, keeping her tone casual. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, $5,000. Rachel's eyes flicked to Emma's ID again, then back to the computer screen without a word. She reached for a clipboard and slid it across the counter toward Emma. "Please fill this out," Rachel instructed, her tone flat and uninterested. Emma's brow furrowed slightly. The request was routine, a name, account number, and withdrawal amount, nothing out of the ordinary. She filled it out swiftly, her fingers brushing the pen with practiced ease. But the moment the form was completed and slid back across the counter, the shift in the air was palpable. Rachel took a quick glance at the form, then at Emma's ID once more. Her eyes lingered for a moment, a subtle hesitation that Emma couldn't ignore. The brief pause felt longer than it was, as if the teller were assessing something that had nothing to do with the transaction at hand. Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard before she picked up the phone. Emma, standing there, felt an uncomfortable knot form in her stomach. The cold, efficient manner in which Rachel had processed the request suddenly turned into a cold, disinterested scrutiny. Emma could feel the unease bubbling beneath the surface, but she chose not to react, giving Rachel the benefit of the doubt. The tension in the air only grew when Rachel muttered, "I'll just get the manager." Within seconds, Emma saw Rachel's face tighten as she dialed the number. The phone call was short and direct. "No thank you. "No, excuse me for the delay." Rachel simply called for James Carter, the branch manager, to come to the counter. Emma's intuition prickled, the rising tension in the air becoming more pronounced with each passing second. As Rachel placed the receiver down, Emma glanced around the lobby, observing the other customers. One man, dressed in a well-tailored suit, stood at the back of the line, waiting for his turn. He didn't seem to have received any such treatment, and his transaction appeared to be moving smoothly. A couple sitting in the corner, engaged in quiet conversation, had been greeted with a smile and no hesitation. Emma's stomach tightened further. A sense of foreboding washed over her. She had hoped for a seamless interaction, an opportunity to witness her policies in action, but this felt different. She wasn't just another customer in the eyes of Rachel. She could feel it. Something about her, perhaps the way she looked, the way she carried herself, had triggered a different response. When James Carter finally appeared, Emma sensed an immediate change in the atmosphere. His steps were measured, his eyes sharp as they met hers. She could already tell that this encounter would be more than just a simple withdrawal. Something wasn't right, and Emma was beginning to understand that her test had just begun. The sharp click of polished shoes echoed across the lobby as James Carter, the branch manager, approached the counter. His expression was tight, unreadable, and for the first time, Emma felt a shift in the air. The tension that had been building between Rachel's cold treatment and her sudden call for the manager now crescendoed into something far more uncomfortable. James stopped just short of the counter, his eyes scanning Emma's ID as if he were trying to decode something beyond its printed details. "Afternoon," he said with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I understand you're trying to make a withdrawal," Emma nodded, keeping her tone measured and calm. "Yes, I'm here to withdraw $5,000 from my account." She said it plainly, as if it were the simplest transaction in the world, and it should have been. James glanced at the clipboard in front of Rachel and then back at Emma's ID. His gaze lingered on her for a fraction of a second longer than was comfortable, before he cleared his throat and asked, "And your full name, Miss Brooks?" Emma stiffened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Emma Brooks." He nodded slowly as if processing the name. "And what exactly do you do for work, Miss Brooks?" His question, while standard for an ID verification, struck her as odd. She had already provided her account number and identification. What more did he need? Emma raised an eyebrow, perplexed. "I'm the CEO of Brookside Trust," she said, keeping her answer simple. She couldn't understand why he needed clarification when she had already provided everything. James's lips curled into a tight smile, though it looked more like a grimace than a gesture of politeness. "I see," he said slowly, as if her answer was less about verification and more about testing her. "CEO, you say?" He leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing as if searching for some sign of insincerity. Emma's patience was beginning to wear thin. "Yes, I said that, and I've been with the bank since its inception." The pause that followed was heavy. James didn't seem to care about the legitimacy of her answer. Instead, his gaze flickered back to the clipboard, as if deciding whether he needed more information to satisfy some unknown requirement. Finally, after a few moments, he straightened his back and asked, "Could you provide us with some additional documentation, Miss Brooks? Perhaps a utility bill or another form of identification?" Emma's stomach tightened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What exactly are you asking for?" she asked, trying to mask her frustration. "You have my ID. You have my account details. And yet you want more." James glanced at Rachel, who had been standing quietly behind him, waiting for a cue. Her expression had softened just slightly since his arrival, but she still refused to meet Emma's eyes directly. It was as if they were both conspiring to make this moment drag on. "I understand this may be frustrating, Miss Brooks," James continued, his tone patronizing. But for larger withdrawals like this, we need to make sure that everything checks out properly. It's our standard procedure." He motioned vaguely toward the security cameras as if they could somehow validate his point. "Standard procedure," Emma repeated, disbelief creeping into her voice. "This is a personal account. I'm not withdrawing $1 million. It's $5,000. Rachel's gaze flickered briefly toward Emma before she returned to her register, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation unfolding before her. "I'm sorry, Miss Brooks, but the process is the process," James said, his smile strained. "I'm just following protocol." Emma stared at him, feeling a deep frustration rising in her chest. She knew the rules. She had written them. She had sat in meetings discussing the importance of fair treatment for every customer, and yet here she was, facing the exact opposite. This wasn't about procedure. This was about something much deeper. "Are you suggesting that because I'm a woman, or because I look a certain way, I need to prove myself more than other customers?" Emma asked, her voice low and controlled, but sharp with an edge of accusation. The words had barely left her mouth when Rachel tensed, and James's posture stiffened. "I don't know what you mean by that, Miss Brooks," James said, though the defensive tone in his voice betrayed him. "This is just about ensuring everything is in order." "Then, why didn't you ask the man who came in before me for a utility bill? Why didn't you stop him and ask for verification?" Emma's eyes narrowed, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Why did you scrutinize me but not him?" James faltered, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for an excuse. But there was no answer, only an uncomfortable silence. Emma could see the subtle shift in his expression, the way his face flushed, the way his fingers tightened around the clipboard. He had no justification, and he knew it. Rachel had been watching the exchange carefully, her eyes darting between the two of them. "It's just a formality," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "A precaution." "A precaution," Emma snapped, leaning forward slightly. "No, Rachel, it's not a precaution. It's discrimination. You're treating me like I'm not supposed to be here." There was a flicker in Rachel's eyes, a sign that she knew the truth. But instead of offering an apology or even an explanation, she turned her back slightly, as though trying to distance herself from the situation. James cleared his throat, still refusing to meet Emma's gaze. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Miss Brooks, but I'm just doing my job. I can't make exceptions." Emma's heart raced as she tried to hold back her anger. She had worked tirelessly to build Brookside Trust into the institution it was today. And yet, standing here in her own bank, she was being treated like an outsider. Her patience was wearing thin, and she knew she had to push back, or nothing would change. This wasn't about security. This wasn't about banking policies. This was about assumptions, about prejudice. And Emma wasn't going to let it slide. "I don't need another form of ID," Emma said, her voice now firm and resolute. "I don't need to prove myself to you. I'm the CEO of this bank, and I want my $5,000. James's expression shifted, the mask of professionalism cracking for a moment. But he didn't back down. Instead, he said, "I'm afraid we can't process your request at this time." His words were cold, final. The air between them grew thick, and Emma felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had expected challenges, but not like this. Not from her own employees. She had never been made to feel this small in her own bank. Emma took a slow, deliberate breath, her frustration simmering beneath the surface. She could feel the tension building, and she knew that now was the moment to reveal the truth. With a calm yet firm voice, Emma looked directly at James. "You don't recognize me, do you?" James blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "I don't understand." Emma's gaze never wavered. "I'm Emma Brooks, the founder and CEO of Brookside Trust." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. James's expression faltered, his eyes wide with shock. The color drained from his face, and Rachel, who had been silently observing, turned pale. Emma could see the realization begin to sink in as they both processed her words. "I'm the one who built this bank," Emma continued, her tone steady. "I approved the construction of this branch. I was there when we broke ground and stood in front of the media, talking about trust, fairness, and customer service." James stared at her as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. You're the CEO," he stammered, clearly rattled. "Yes," Emma replied, her voice unwavering. "I approved the budget. I was involved in the hiring process for employees, including you, James, and you, Rachel." Rachel's face flushed with embarrassment, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. James swallowed hard, his discomfort obvious. He glanced at the form on the counter, then back at Emma, but still, no apology or admission of mistake came. Emma took a step closer to the counter. "I'm the reason you're both here. And I've created the policies you claim to follow." Her voice tightened. "And now, you're treating me like I'm not supposed to be here." James opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mask of professionalism cracked, but he quickly tried to recover. "We can't process the withdrawal without proper verification." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You can't process the withdrawal because you've decided I don't belong here." "And that's the problem, James. This isn't about procedure, it's about bias." James shifted uncomfortably, but instead of backing down, he clung to his position. "We're just doing our job," he said, his tone defensive. Emma sighed deeply, realizing this wouldn't end easily, but she was determined. "This isn't just about a withdrawal, it's about something far more serious. And this won't go unnoticed." Emma stood tall, her gaze unflinching. The frustration inside her was now focused, clear, and resolute. She had tried to give them a chance to correct their behavior, but it was clear that James and Rachel were more concerned with their pride than doing what was right. "James," Emma said firmly, "I want you to call corporate management immediately and arrange a meeting to discuss this issue." James hesitated for a moment, then opened his mouth to protest, but Emma's unwavering stare made him think twice. This was no longer a small matter. It was a direct challenge to the bank's core values. He swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the situation. "This is not just a violation of customer rights, James," Emma continued. "This is a direct disrespect toward the founder of this bank, everything we've worked for, and I won't stand for it." Rachel, who had been quiet, shifted nervously. Emma's sharp gaze briefly flickered in her direction but quickly returned to James. Emma knew Rachel was starting to grasp the weight of what was happening, but it was James who needed to be held accountable. "Tyler," Emma called, motioning to the security guard nearby. "Stay here. I'm holding them accountable." Tyler nodded and took his position near the counter, a silent but powerful reminder that Emma meant business. The silence between them grew heavier, James clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back down. After a long pause, James sighed. "Okay, Miss Brooks, I'll call corporate." "I'll get the meeting set up." Emma nodded, her gaze never leaving him. "Good, I expect it to be handled immediately." James picked up the phone, his hands shaking slightly as he dialed. Emma stood by, arms crossed, unwavering in her resolve. When James finished the call, he looked at Emma, his apology sounding forced. "I'm sorry, Miss Brooks. This shouldn't have happened." "It was a mistake." Emma gave him a cold smile. "Your apology doesn't change what happened, James. You've humiliated me and violated the very principles this bank stands for. An apology won't fix it." She took a step closer. "This is just the beginning. I'm implementing a complete overhaul of our policies. Every employee will undergo retraining on customer service and anti-discrimination. And there will be stricter monitoring moving forward." Rachel avoided Emma's gaze, and James remained silent, the reality of what was happening sinking in. Emma turned to leave, her steps echoing through the branch. This was the change that needed to happen, not just in this branch, but across the entire bank. Emma was determined to ensure this never happened again. Emma's experience proved that change isn't just about writing policies. It's about taking action to ensure those policies are followed. Words on paper mean nothing unless the people in charge are committed to real, tangible change. The lesson Emma's story teaches is clear. When you stand up for your rights and refuse to be misled by ambiguous rules or procedures, you have the power to change everything. Emma could have let this incident slide, but instead, she chose to confront the unfair treatment head-on, demanding accountability and respect, not just for herself, but for every customer of her bank. By taking immediate action, Emma not only righted the wrong done to her but also set an example for her entire company. Her decision to implement comprehensive training and stricter monitoring sent a clear message: fairness is non-negotiable. In the face of adversity, Emma stood firm, showing that one person can make a profound difference. Her story emphasizes the importance of fairness in every action. Emma's commitment to the bank's values of equality and respect, backed by her decisive leadership, ensured that no one would ever face the same mistreatment again.